The sky above Virelia burned with fire and smoke. Explosions ripped through the ruined cityscape, sending chunks of concrete and metal tumbling to the ground. Fires stretched across the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of red and orange. Somewhere far above, warships streaked across the sky, firing bolts of energy that lit the battlefield like lightning. Amid the chaos, the ground shook beneath the boots of soldiers, both human and alien. Captain Ethan Cole ran across the debris-strewn street, his pulse pounding not just from exertion, but from the adrenaline that fueled every human soldier in this endless war. His suit, scorched and scratched from previous skirmishes, clung to his body, and the hum of his energy rifle was a comforting weight in his hands. Around him, the sounds of battle roared like a living creature, screams, blasts, and the alien shriek of Xeran weapons. The humans had been sent to secure the city from the Xerans, a powerful alien species that had expanded aggressively into human space. Known for their strength, speed, and ruthlessness, the Xerans were unlike any enemy Ethan had faced before. Their bodies were tall and sinewy, covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like black obsidian. Their 4 arms moved in precise, deadly motions, and their eyes, glowing faintly, scanned for weakness. Ethan pressed his back against the crumbling wall of what had once been a marketplace. Smoke filled his lungs, and he coughed violently, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when every second counted. He scanned the street ahead and saw movement. Xeran warriors advancing with their energy blades, their steps making the ground tremble. Behind them, his squad mates were pinned down, struggling to hold their positions. He knew he had to act. The humans were losing ground, and if the Xerans took the city's central plaza, the human forces would be forced to retreat, leaving civilians trapped in the chaos. Ethan ducked low, using the rubble for cover, and fired a series of precise shots. A Xeran fell, its glowing eyes dimming, but there were too many of them. The enemy pressed forward relentlessly. Suddenly, a figure separated from the group. Ethan's eyes widened. The Xeran was wounded, its armor cracked and smoke rising from deep gashes. Its movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. Most soldiers would see this as a chance to finish off a weakened enemy. But something in Ethan's mind froze him. He noticed the alien's struggle to stay upright, the flicker of pain and fear in its glowing eyes. For a moment, the war disappeared. Ethan saw not a monster, not an enemy, but a being fighting to survive. And in that moment, a decision formed inside him. A choice that could cost him everything. He sprinted forward. "Wait, don't let him die," he shouted almost to himself. Bullets and energy blasts whizzed past him as he dove toward the Xeran. The alien swayed on its legs, its arms trembling. Ethan reached it just as a shard of debris fell from a nearby building. He grabbed the Xeran's arm and pulled it into the safety of a broken wall, narrowly avoiding a deadly plasma shot. The Xeran looked at him, confused, its mandibles twitching. Ethan didn't care about the strange noises it made. He pulled a medkit from his pack, ignoring the danger around them. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. Human and Xeran soldiers alike were falling in waves, screaming and clashing in deadly ballet. He tore open the medkit and examined the Xeran. Its wounds were severe. Deep gashes ran across its chest and arms, and the alien's breathing was ragged, mechanical almost, as though its body was rejecting the pain. Ethan had seen many injuries in his time as a soldier, but nothing like this. Xeran biology was unlike anything he had studied. Their bodies were resilient, but when injured deeply, their life signs could fade quickly. This isn't going to work with normal medicine," he muttered. He pulled out a small device, a prototype that allowed human blood to adapt temporarily to other life forms using nanotech. It was experimental, dangerous, and unauthorized. But Ethan didn't hesitate. He had to save this life, whatever the cost. The Xeran's glowing eyes tracked him, and for a brief moment Ethan felt a strange connection. As if the alien understood the risk, he rolled up his sleeve, injecting his own blood into the device and then into the Xeran's arm. A bright blue light ran through the alien's body as the nanobots worked to bridge the vast gap between species. The alien convulsed. Ethan flinched but held on, keeping the injector steady. The ground shook violently as an explosion rocked the nearby building. Dust and debris filled the air, but he didn't look away. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The Xeran's breathing grew steadier, its movements slowing as it regained strength. Finally, the convulsion stopped. The alien blinked, and though its body was still weak, it raised a trembling hand in what seemed to be a gesture of thanks. Ethan nodded, exhausted, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. Around them, the battle raged on, but for one brief instant, humanity, its courage, its empathy, had triumphed over hatred. Ethan knew he had broken rules, perhaps even laws. Saving an enemy soldier was unheard of, unimaginable in a war that had cost billions of lives. But as he looked at the alien, he realized that what he had done could be the first step toward something greater. Even in the middle of war, even on a planet soaked in blood and fire, a spark of hope could exist. He helped the Xeran to its feet, supporting it as they moved toward the temporary human lines. Soldiers nearby stared in shock, murmurs running through the ranks. Some whispered accusations of treason. Others watched silently, unsure of how to react. But Ethan didn't care. All that mattered was the life in front of him. Fragile but alive, as they reached cover, the alien warrior leaned weakly against him, its glowing eyes fixed on Ethan. In its own way, it was communicating gratitude, respect, and perhaps something more, a recognition of shared courage and the value of life. From the distant hills, Ethan could see more Xerans approaching, their figures silhouetted against the fires of the city. Yet, in that moment, the human soldier knew that the war was not just fought with weapons. It was fought with choices, with courage, and with the willingness to see an enemy as more than a target. And somewhere deep in the chaos, a silent promise formed in his mind. This alien had survived today, not just because of a miracle of science, but because a human had dared to act differently. In a world defined by violence and hatred, Ethan Cole had chosen life. The battle was far from over. The city was still burning. Human and Xeran soldiers were still clashing in deadly combat. But in a quiet corner of the war-torn streets amid the rubble and smoke, a single act of bravery shone brighter than any weapon. And for the first time in a long while, the future seemed just a little bit brighter. Ethan tightened his grip on the Xeran, scanning the horizon. The war would continue. Orders would come and danger would return, but he had made a choice that day, a choice that would echo far beyond the battlefield. He had proven that humans were more than just fighters. They were protectors, courageous, compassionate, and willing to risk everything to save a life, even an enemy's. As the sun set behind the ruined city, painting the smoke in gold and crimson, Ethan and the wounded Xeran moved forward side by side. The battle would rage on, but something fundamental had changed. And in the heart of war, that change might just be enough to alter the fate of both species. The battlefield was still alive with fire, smoke, and the cries of soldiers when Ethan helped the Xeran, now semi-conscious, to a safer trench. Dust and debris clung to their clothes and armor. Around them, explosions shook the ground, but in this small trench there was a strange quiet, a pocket of life amid chaos. Ethan lowered Kryn, the Xeran warrior, gently onto the dirt floor. The alien's forearms twitched in pain, and its glowing eyes flickered as it tried to focus. Ethan crouched beside him, his mind racing. He had made the decision to save this enemy soldier, but now the consequences were becoming real. "Hang in there," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to Kryn. He opened his med kit again, scanning its contents. Bandages, painkillers, and emergency stimulants, but none of it would work for a Xeran. Their biology was alien, unpredictable. The wounds were deep. Kryn's life signs were fading again. Ethan clenched his jaw. He had one option left, the experimental cross-species blood transfusion. It was highly risky. Human blood rarely interacted safely with alien physiology, and even with nanotech to adapt it temporarily, there was no guarantee the alien would survive. He also knew that he himself could be harmed. A reaction could be deadly. Yet looking at Kryn's fading life, Ethan felt there was no other choice. He activated the nanotech injector, checking the gauges and lights. The small device hummed softly, a quiet contrast to the roaring war around them. Sweat ran down Ethan's temple. His pulse quickened, and he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him. This wasn't just saving a soldier. It was breaking every rule, defying orders, and risking both their lives. Kryn's eyes opened slightly, glowing faintly in the trench's dim light. Ethan noticed the alien's gaze was fixed on him, almost as if it understood that this human was about to risk everything to keep it alive. There was no time to hesitate. Ethan rolled up his sleeve and attached the injector to his vein, then connected it to Kryn's arm. The nanobots began transferring, weaving human blood into alien physiology. At first, nothing happened. Ethan held his breath, waiting, fear clawing at his chest. Then Kryn convulsed violently. Its body shook, muscles contracting and relaxing in uncontrolled motions. Ethan gritted his teeth, gripping the injector tightly. The alien's mandibles clicked sharply, a sound of pain and confusion. Sparks from nearby energy blasts flickered across the trench walls, but Ethan didn't look up. Every second counted. Every moment of hesitation could mean death. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Ethan's vision blurred from exhaustion and the constant roar of battle, but he held steady. Finally, the convulsions began to slow. Kryn's breathing, ragged and uneven, became steadier. Its forearms twitched less, and the flicker in its glowing eyes dimmed to a calmer light. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding through him. "You're going to make it," he whispered, though he wasn't entirely sure if it was true. He watched as the alien blinked, slowly raising a trembling arm in a gesture that seemed to say, "Thank you." Around them the war continued. Explosions shook the city and distant shouts signaled ongoing combat. Yet in that small trench, the two soldiers, one human, one alien, shared a rare moment of peace. Ethan knew that the risk was far from over. Kryn's body could still reject the transfusion, and the battlefield was no safer now than before. He looked at the Xiran's injuries again. The wounds were deep but not fatal for now. Ethan carefully bandaged the worst cuts, working quickly but gently. He noticed something strange. Kryn's glowing eyes followed his every move, almost like a human would watch someone who had saved their life. There was awareness, recognition, and perhaps even gratitude in those alien eyes. "Name?" Ethan asked cautiously, unsure if the alien could respond. "Kryn," the Xiran rasped, the sound rough and mechanical. It was a difficult word for the alien to form, but Ethan understood. He nodded. "Ethan," he replied, offering a hand to shake. Kryn hesitated, then touched one of Ethan's hands lightly with its clawed fingers. It was awkward, unpracticed, but it was a start. Ethan glanced around the trench. His squadmates were scattered, taking cover, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Rumors of a human saving a Xiran had spread quickly. Some soldiers whispered angrily, "Traitor. Foolish." Others looked on in quiet curiosity, unable to comprehend why someone would save an enemy. Ethan ignored them. For him, the choice had been clear. Life was life. War didn't have to erase compassion. Hours passed. Kryn's condition stabilized slowly. The alien's breathing was steadier, and it began to sit up, leaning against the trench wall. Ethan offered water, and Kryn awkwardly accepted, using its hands with careful precision. Communication was limited, but gestures and nods were enough. "You help," Kryn said finally, its voice strange and harsh but understandable. Human, strong. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "You're strong too," he replied. "You survived. That counts for something." As the day turned into evening, Ethan knew he couldn't stay in the open trench forever. The battle would continue, and both human and Xiran reinforcements could arrive at any moment. He helped Kryn to move, guiding the alien toward a safer area behind the human lines. The journey was slow. Kryn's body was still recovering, and the terrain was treacherous. Yet step by step they moved forward, relying on each other's strength. Finally, they reached a makeshift field hospital behind the human front lines. Medics rushed forward, surprised to see a Xiran among humans and alive. Ethan quickly explained the situation, emphasizing that Kryn had been saved through unconventional means. The medics exchanged worried glances. Field doctors had never seen anything like this. Could the alien survive beyond the transfusion? Could the human donor survive too? Kryn was placed on a reinforced medical bed. Ethan knelt beside him, brushing dust and debris from the alien's armor. "You'll be okay," he whispered, hoping his words carried weight beyond fear. The medical team started monitoring Kryn's vitals, adjusting the nanotech systems to maintain stability. For hours, Ethan stayed by his side, watching the alien slowly regain strength. There was a strange bond forming, a silent understanding that transcended species. Ethan felt a quiet pride in his actions, knowing that in a world consumed by war, he had chosen something different. Mercy. Night fell, and the sounds of battle faded slightly, replaced by distant echoes and the occasional blast. Kryn's breathing was calm now, and the alien's eyes followed Ethan's every move. The Xiran reached out a hand and placed it on Ethan's arm, a gesture that seemed almost human in its simplicity. "You, human, brave," Kryn said softly. Ethan nodded. "I did what anyone should do," he replied. "I don't care who you are. Life matters." The medics gave Ethan a worried glance but didn't stop him. There was nothing they could do. The alien's survival depended on both technology and the human who had risked everything. Ethan realized that Kryn wasn't just an enemy soldier anymore. He was a being with thoughts, emotions, and honor. Saving him was more than a medical miracle. It was a human choice, a human act of courage and compassion. By morning, Kryn could sit up fully, still weak, but clearly recovering. Ethan helped the alien adjust, teaching it to use its limbs with care, guiding it through simple movements to regain strength. Other soldiers came to see the alien, initially in shock, but some began to nod in respect, understanding that what had happened was remarkable. Ethan's decision had consequences beyond the battlefield. His commanders were notified, and some were furious. "You risked the mission to save an enemy," one officer scolded. "Do you understand what that could have cost us?" Ethan met the officer's gaze steadily. "I understand. And I also understand that saving a life, any life, changes more than just one battle. Maybe it can change how we see the war." Some officers were silent, uncertain how to respond. Others seemed to realize something they had ignored. Humans had a power beyond weapons. Courage, compassion, and the willingness to act against fear and hatred were strengths that no alien weapon could match. As Kryn rested, Ethan sat beside him, reflecting on the events of the past day. The battlefield would continue. The war was far from over, and danger still lurked at every corner. But in saving this alien warrior, he had done something extraordinary. He had proven that humanity's value wasn't just in fighting, it was in choosing life, courage, and hope, even when the odds were against them. And in Kryn's glowing eyes, Ethan could see that the alien understood. This act of mercy had created a bond that would survive the chaos of war. It was the first step toward something neither species had expected: trust, respect, and perhaps even friendship. Outside, the battlefield raged, but inside the small field hospital, a human and an alien shared a quiet victory. One life had been saved. One choice had been made. And somewhere deep in the universe, the consequences of that choice were beginning to unfold. The morning sun rose over the smoldering city of Virelia, casting long shadows over the ruins of buildings torn apart by war. The air was thick with smoke and dust, and the distant sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed across the battlefield. Yet in the small field hospital tucked behind the human lines, a quiet sense of hope lingered. Captain Ethan Cole sat beside Kryn, the Xeran warrior, who was now able to sit upright without assistance. The alien's forearms moved carefully, testing muscles and joints that had stiffened during recovery. Every movement was cautious but steady. Ethan watched with pride. The transfusion had worked, and against all odds, Kryn had survived. The medics came and went, checking vital signs, adjusting the nanotech devices that kept the alien stable, and whispering to one another in astonishment. Human and Xeran biologies had never interacted like this before. The successful transfusion was unprecedented, and everyone in the hospital knew it. Kryn's glowing eyes met Ethan's. "Human saved me." "Brave," the alien said, its voice still rough but stronger than before. Ethan smiled. "I did what I had to do. No one deserves to die if there's a chance to live." Kryn tilted its head, processing the words. Humans and Xerans were not natural allies. They had fought wars across countless worlds, each seeing the other as a threat. But now in this quiet corner of the battlefield, those old fears seemed less important. Kryn's life depended on a human, and the Xeran's understanding of gratitude and respect was growing. The news of Ethan's actions spread quickly. Soldiers whispered in tents and trenches about the human who had saved a Xeran enemy. Some were skeptical, some outraged, but many were silently impressed. A few officers, still frustrated with Ethan, approached him. "You risked the mission to save an enemy soldier," one officer said sharply. "Do you understand what could have happened?" Ethan met the officer's gaze evenly. "I understand. And I also understand that saving a life, any life, changes more than just one battle. Maybe it can change how we see this war." The officer paused, unsure how to respond. Others in the room looked at Ethan differently now. Courage, they realized, could take many forms, not just in combat but in choices that defied fear and hatred. Kryn's recovery continued steadily. By midday, the alien was able to stand on its own, leaning slightly on a support bar provided by the medics. Ethan guided Kryn carefully, teaching it how to move without straining its body. Each step the Xeran took was a small victory, Proof that the humans' risky decision had paid off. Can fight again? Kryn asked hesitantly, its glowing eyes fixed on Ethan. Yes, Ethan replied, but we'll do it together, carefully, step by step. The idea of a human and a Xeran working together seemed impossible to most soldiers, yet Ethan and Kryn were already proving it could happen. Their bond was more than survival. It was trust, respect, and the recognition of shared courage. Over the next few days, the battlefield shifted. Human forces, inspired by Ethan's actions, began to question the simple narrative of enemies and allies. Some soldiers who had once attacked Xerans without hesitation now hesitated, wondering if there might be another way. Small acts of compassion began to ripple through the ranks, helping wounded enemies, sharing limited supplies, and rescuing those caught in the crossfire. Kryn's presence alone challenged perceptions. The aliens' injuries and survival were living proof that humans had abilities beyond combat skills. Intelligence, courage, and empathy could change the course of events in ways no weapon could. Ethan and Kryn began moving together on reconnaissance missions, testing their new partnership. Kryn's enhanced senses and agility complemented Ethan's tactical skills and quick thinking. They navigated ruined buildings, avoided patrols, and rescued civilians trapped in dangerous zones. Each successful mission strengthened their bond and slowly changed the way soldiers viewed the conflict. One evening, after a particularly tense mission, Ethan and Kryn returned to the field hospital. Kryn sat quietly, its glowing eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. Ethan noticed a subtle change in the alien's posture, less tension, more awareness. Kryn was learning, adapting, and perhaps even beginning to understand human emotion in a new way. You understand, Ethan said softly, that this war isn't just about killing. It's about protecting, surviving, and sometimes making choices that others won't. Kryn's mandibles clicked, a sound that Ethan had learned meant agreement. The alien extended a hand and touched Ethan's arm lightly, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. In the midst of war, such moments were rare, but they were powerful. Word of the human-Xeran partnership reached higher-ranking officers. Some were skeptical, fearing treason or betrayal. Others saw potential. If humans and Xerans could cooperate on small scales, perhaps larger-scale alliances could be considered. It was a radical idea, one that challenged centuries of conflict and hatred, but Ethan's actions had already planted the seed. Meanwhile, Kryn's health improved steadily. The alien regained strength in its arms and legs, and by the end of the week it could move without assistance. The medics marveled at the progress. No one had expected such a recovery, not without extensive medical intervention. Yet here was living proof. An alien warrior, saved by a human, thriving against all odds. Ethan watched Kryn train in simple movements, guiding the alien to use its limbs effectively and safely. Each motion was deliberate, cautious, but increasingly confident. Soldiers who passed by stopped to watch, their expressions shifting from disbelief to admiration. The story of the human who saved a Xeran was no longer whispered. It was celebrated. One afternoon, while Ethan adjusted Kryn's stance, a small group of Xeran soldiers approached the field hospital. At first, human soldiers tensed, weapons ready. But Kryn stepped forward, glowing eyes fixed on his own kind. The alien made gestures of peace and acknowledgement, speaking softly in its native language. The humans watched in awe as the Xeran soldiers listened, their postures relaxing. Kryn had survived thanks to a human, and now it was demonstrating that humans could be trusted. This small act, saving one life, was rippling outward, influencing perceptions and potentially altering the course of the war. Ethan realized the magnitude of what he had done. He hadn't just saved Kryn's life, he had shown that humans were capable of bravery and compassion that transcended hatred. This wasn't a battle won with weapons. It was a battle won with moral courage. That evening, Ethan and Kryn sat quietly outside the field hospital. The city's fires cast a golden glow across the ruins. The distant sounds of battle continued, but here there was a rare moment of calm. "You, human, special," Kryn said finally, its voice rough but sincere. Ethan smiled. "We all have the choice to be brave. And sometimes being brave means protecting life, even when it's difficult." Kryn's eyes glowed brighter, a subtle signal that the alien understood. The trust between them was growing, and with it, the possibility of a future where humans and Xerans could see each other not as enemies, but as beings capable of mutual respect. As night fell over Varelia, Ethan reflected on the past few days. The war was far from over. The battlefield would continue to roar with fire, and both human and Xeran soldiers would continue to fight fiercely. Yet in this small corner of chaos, something extraordinary had happened. One human had risked everything to save an enemy, and in doing so had created a spark of hope, trust, and understanding. Ethan knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be skeptics, there would be danger, and there would be challenges to overcome. But he also knew that humans had something unique: courage, empathy, and the ability to act selflessly even in the face of fear. And somewhere deep in the heart of Kryn, the Xeran warrior understood that too. Together they had survived. Together they were beginning to show others that a new way of thinking was possible, a way that valued life, honor, and bravery above hatred and destruction. The city was still burning, and the war raged on. But in a quiet field hospital behind the front lines, a human and a Xeran shared a victory far greater than any battlefield conquest. They had proven that courage, compassion, and understanding could shine even in the darkest hours of war. The battlefield of Varelia had changed in subtle ways since Kryn's survival. The smoke still curled from ruined buildings, and the distant echoes of combat reminded everyone that the war was far from over. But now there was a new presence, a human and a Xeran moving together, side by side, demonstrating something neither side had expected: cooperation. Captain Ethan Cole tightened his grip on his energy rifle as he scanned the ruined streets. Kryn moved beside him, forearms ready, glowing eyes scanning for threats with precision only a Xeran warrior could possess. Soldiers on both sides hesitated when they saw the duo. Humans whispered in awe while Xeran scouts paused, unsure how to react. The partnership of a human and an alien soldier was unprecedented and unsettling to those trained to see each other only as enemies. "Check that corner," Ethan said quietly, pointing toward a crumbling building. "Could be civilians trapped inside." Kryn tilted its head, understanding immediately. Its clawed hands moved quickly but carefully as it approached the building entrance. Ethan followed, covering the alien as they moved in. The building was unstable. Debris hung precariously from the ceiling, ready to fall with the slightest disturbance. The air smelled of smoke and scorched metal. Inside, they found a family of humans huddled under broken furniture. Fear was evident in their eyes. Ethan motioned for them to stay quiet, then nodded to Kryn. With surprising gentleness, Kryn lifted the debris blocking their exit. Its strength was immense, but it was tempered by care, guided by Ethan's instructions. One by one, the civilians escaped the building safely. When they emerged into the open street, the civilians stared at Kryn in awe, their fear slowly turning to gratitude. A human had saved a Xeran, and now that Xeran was saving humans, it was difficult to comprehend, but in that moment the actions spoke louder than words. "You, strong, together," Kryn said softly, its glowing eyes meeting Ethan's. Ethan smiled. "That's how it should be. Strength isn't just about fighting, it's about protecting. That's what we're here for." The rest of the day passed in a blur of missions, rescues, and skirmishes. Ethan and Kryn moved together like a single unit, covering each other, anticipating threats, and making split-second decisions that saved lives. Human soldiers began to notice the effectiveness of their teamwork. It wasn't just bravery, it was strategy, intelligence, and trust. Kryn's enhanced senses and agility complemented Ethan's quick thinking and resourcefulness perfectly. During one patrol, they encountered a squad of Xeran soldiers preparing an ambush. Typically, human forces would engage immediately, risking lives in the chaos of the fight, but Ethan and Kryn had another plan. "Wait," Ethan whispered. "Let me try something." Kryn's eyes flicked toward him, acknowledging the command. Using hand signals, Ethan coordinated a diversion. Kryn moved silently to flank the ambush while Ethan drew attention from the front. In moments, the ambushers were surrounded, confused, and captured, not killed. Human soldiers watched in shock. They had been trained to see Xerans only as enemies to eliminate, yet here was a human saving lives on both sides, showing that strategy and compassion could achieve more than violence alone. Later, Ethan and Kryn returned to their base, exhausted but triumphant. The medics had prepared refreshments, and Ethan handed Kryn a hydration pack. The alien took it cautiously at first, then drank steadily. Humans gathered around, some whispering, some openly watching, unsure whether to trust the alien yet unable to deny its bravery and skill. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "most people won't understand why we're doing this. But it's not about them. It's about making choices that are right, even if they're hard." Kryn clicked its mandibles, a gesture Ethan had come to recognize as agreement. In the silent bond between them, words were often unnecessary. Trust and respect had formed something stronger than orders or ideology. It was partnership. As days turned into weeks, the duo became a symbol among the soldiers. Their missions grew more daring, rescuing civilians trapped in collapsing buildings, defusing alien and human bombs, and intercepting ambushes before lives were lost. Each time, the success of their collaboration inspired those around them. Human soldiers began to help Xerans caught in dangerous situations, and some Xerans began sparing humans, curious about the unusual behavior of the one who had survived thanks to Ethan's bravery. One evening, after a long mission, Ethan and Kryn sat atop a ruined skyscraper. Looking out over the city, fires still burned, smoke filled the sky, and the distant sounds of war never truly ceased. Yet there was a strange peace in the moment. "You see," Ethan said softly, "this war doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to make us monsters. We can choose to be different." Kryn's eyes glowed faintly, a signal that it understood. The alien reached out, touching Ethan's arm lightly, a gesture of camaraderie and acknowledgement. In the midst of destruction, a human and a Xeran had formed a connection that transcended species, tradition, and centuries of conflict. News of their actions spread beyond the immediate battlefield. Commanders, initially skeptical, began to see results. Missions executed by the duo had higher survival rates and fewer casualties. Reports reached the higher ranks that a human had saved a Xeran, and now, together, they were saving many more lives than anyone had imagined possible. Some officers remained angry, fearing that alliances with enemies could weaken human strategy, but others saw the undeniable truth. Courage and compassion could be as powerful as any weapon. Ethan's influence was spreading quietly but effectively, showing humans and Xerans alike that a single choice, choosing to save a life, could ripple through an entire conflict. Meanwhile, Kryn's recovery was nearly complete. The alien moved with precision and confidence, its strength restored and augmented by natural Xeran abilities. Yet it remained careful, aware that human life and alien life were fragile. Ethan had taught it patience, strategy, and the importance of choosing restraint over violence. Together, they were a force unlike any the battlefield had ever seen. During a critical mission to secure a collapsed underground shelter, Ethan and Kryn led a small squad of humans and Xerans. Civilians were trapped under debris, injured and frightened. Using teamwork and combined skill, they coordinated a rescue operation that saved dozens of lives. Human soldiers began to follow Kryn's lead, understanding that the alien who had once been an enemy could now be an ally. After the mission, Ethan looked at Kryn, proud and contemplative. "See what happens when we trust each other?" he said. Kryn's glowing eyes flickered, a soft response that Ethan interpreted as agreement. The partnership was no longer unusual. It was effective, respected, and slowly changing perceptions. The war on Varelia continued, and danger lurked in every corner. But in every mission, every rescue, and every life saved, Ethan and Kryn demonstrated something vital. Humans had a strength beyond weapons, a power beyond fear. Courage, empathy, and the willingness to act morally in impossible situations were traits that inspired allies, unnerved enemies, and reshaped the battlefield in ways no strategy could predict. As the sun set, Ethan and Kryn stood together, watching the fires light the horizon. The city was broken, but hope had been planted. Soldiers on both sides had begun to see the possibility of something new, a future where humans and Xerans could coexist, not as enemies, but as beings capable of mutual respect. And in that quiet moment, amid smoke and ruin, Ethan understood something profound. The war might continue, but the legacy of a single brave choice, saving a life against all odds, could echo far beyond this battlefield. Kryn, standing beside him, glowed softly in the twilight, a living testament to human courage and the potential for change. Together they were more than soldiers. They were symbols. They were proof that even in the darkest hours of war, humanity, its compassion, bravery, and empathy, could shine brighter than any weapon. The battlefield was still alive with chaos, but the partnership of Ethan and Kryn had forged something stronger: trust, courage, and a new way forward. In the fires of war, a spark of hope burned brightly, and for the first time many believed that peace, however fragile, was possible. The city of Virelia was still scarred from war. Buildings lay in ruins, streets were cracked and filled with rubble, and the air was heavy with smoke. Yet among the chaos, a new kind of energy pulsed, a sense of possibility, a fragile hope born from the courage of a single human soldier. Captain Ethan Cole walked through the field hospital, checking on civilians and injured soldiers alike. Beside him, Kryn moved with confidence and purpose. The Xeran warrior had fully recovered, and the once wounded alien now served as a bridge between two species who had known only conflict for centuries. Soldiers watched them pass, whispers of admiration spreading among both humans and Xerans. Ethan's choices had set events into motion that no one could have predicted. By saving Kryn's life, he had challenged centuries of hatred and fear. That single act of courage had inspired others to act with compassion, even in the heart of battle. And now the higher-ranking officers were beginning to see the results. One officer approached Ethan cautiously. "Captain Cole, your actions. They've done something remarkable. The humans and Xerans in your sector, they're cooperating. Civilians are being rescued faster, casualties are lower, and morale has improved." Ethan nodded, though his expression remained humble. "I just did what needed to be done," he said. "But it seems others are learning that courage isn't only about fighting. It's about choosing life even when it's risky." Kryn clicked its mandibles in agreement, its glowing eyes reflecting quiet pride. The alien had come to understand the human's meaning of bravery. To Kryn, courage was not just about strength or skill. It was about making choices that protected life, even in the face of danger. The following days were filled with joint missions that showcased the power of their partnership. Humans and Xerans worked together to clear the city of unexploded devices, rescue trapped civilians, and prevent unnecessary deaths on both sides. Each success strengthened the fragile trust growing between the two species. Where fear and hatred had once dominated, there was now cautious respect and collaboration. During a critical meeting of senior commanders from both species, Ethan and Kryn were asked to testify about their experiences. The room was tense. Humans and Xerans eyed one another suspiciously, yet Ethan spoke with calm authority, recounting the story of Kryn's rescue and the importance of courage and empathy in the battlefield. "You see," Ethan explained, "this war doesn't have to be endless. Lives can be saved, trust can be built, and understanding can grow if we are willing to act with courage, even when it's difficult. One choice can create a ripple that changes everything." Kryn stepped forward, translating some of Ethan's words into Xeran gestures and clicks. The alien's presence was powerful, proof that the message wasn't just theory, it was reality. Humans had saved a Xeran, and together they had saved countless lives. The room fell silent, and slowly nods of acknowledgement spread among the officers. For many, it was the first time they had seen a human act with such unselfish bravery, risking not only personal safety but also breaking rules to save an enemy. That courage could not be ignored. It challenged assumptions about the enemy, the war, and what it meant to be human. Back on the battlefield, the changes were tangible. Soldiers began helping enemies who were injured, sharing limited supplies, and even coordinating rescue operations with former foes. The ripple of Ethan's choice had grown into a wave that was reshaping the war, one act of compassion at a time. One afternoon, Ethan and Kryn were called to lead a joint mission to evacuate civilians from a collapsing residential district. Buildings were unstable, fires threatened to spread, and hostile forces still lurked nearby. Yet together the human and Xeran navigated the dangers with skill, moving with a rhythm that inspired both their squads. Civilians watched in awe as humans and Xerans moved together, not as enemies, but as protectors. Mothers clutched their children. Elderly citizens trembled with fear, yet hope flickered in their eyes. The sight of these two warriors side by side demonstrated that cooperation and courage could overcome centuries of conflict. By evening, the evacuation was complete. No lives were lost, and the civilians were safe. Soldiers on both sides were changed by the experience, realizing that collaboration, trust, and courage could be as powerful as any weapon. As the sun set over the ruined city, Ethan and Kryn stood on a hill overlooking Virelia. Fires burned faintly in the distance, but the city was no longer a place of total despair. Bridges between humans and Xerans were being built, slowly but surely, one act of courage at a time. "You did it," Kryn said softly, its voice filled with respect. "Not just saved me, but others. Changed everything." Ethan looked at the alien warrior, a small smile on his face. "We did it together. Courage isn't mine alone. It's everyone who chooses to act even when it's hard." Kryn's glowing eyes flickered warmly. The bond between human and Xeran was no longer fragile. It was solid, built on shared experience, trust, and understanding. The alien warrior had survived, learned, and grown, and in turn had shown humans a new way to approach the war. Over the next weeks, formal talks began between human and Xeran commanders. Small truces were negotiated, and zones were established where soldiers could work together to protect civilians rather than attack each other. The war was far from over, but the seeds of lasting peace had been planted. All of it traced back to one courageous human soldier who had chosen to save an enemy's life. Ethan watched the progress quietly, knowing that the road ahead was still dangerous. Yet he also understood something fundamental. Humans had a unique power that no weapon could match. Courage, empathy, and moral choice could influence not just a battlefield, but the hearts and minds of an entire species. Kryn stood beside him, its presence a reminder of what had been accomplished. The Xeran warrior had once been an enemy, wounded and near death. Now the alien was a symbol of change, a living testament to human bravery and the potential for cooperation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan addressed a group of soldiers from both species gathered in the city's square. "This war doesn't define us," he said. "Our choices do. Each life we save, each act of courage, each moment of understanding, it shapes the future. Humanity's strength is not just in weapons or skill. It is in our willingness to act even when it's difficult. That is the legacy we leave." The crowd listened, silent at first. Then slowly, applause and clicks of approval began to spread. Humans and Xerans alike recognized the truth in his words. Courage, compassion, and moral integrity were not weaknesses. They were strengths that could change the course of history. Later, Ethan and Kryn stood at the edge of the city, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time in a long time, the night felt peaceful. The war would continue and challenges remained, but hope was alive. "You changed. Much," Kryn said softly. Ethan smiled, looking out at the horizon. "No, Kryn, we changed it together. Courage doesn't belong to one species. It belongs to anyone who chooses to act rightly, even when it's hard. That's the human way, but it's also a choice anyone can make." The alien warrior nodded, understanding in its glowing eyes. Together, they had proven that humans could be more than fighters. Humans could inspire, heal, and lead by example. They could show that courage and empathy were as powerful as any weapon, shaping the destiny of a world, and perhaps an entire galaxy. In the heart of a ruined city, amidst the echoes of war, a human soldier and a Xeran warrior had forged a bond that would resonate for generations. The human's courage had saved a life, but more than that, it had saved hope, trust, and the possibility of a future where enemies could become allies. And in that quiet, glowing moment, Ethan knew the truth. The legacy of one human's bravery could change the fate of many. A single act of courage, selfless, daring, and compassionate, had the power to alter the course of history. Humanity had proven its greatest strength, not in destruction but in the choice to protect, to empathize, and to inspire. The war of Viralia would continue, but the world was no longer the same. Humans and Xerans would carry forward the lessons learned, that courage could bridge impossible divides and that empathy could turn enemies into allies. And at the center of that change stood one human soldier who dared to save a life, believing that hope could survive even in the darkest hours of war. As the stars sparkled above, Ethan and Kryn stood side by side, silent but united. The city around them was broken, but the future was bright. And for the first time in centuries, humans and Xerans glimpsed a world where cooperation, courage, and understanding could prevail.